Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate Zero. Okay, Suso's getting food. About half the seats at Go Go Curry were full. It was Sunday, but it was also after 2 p.m., and so the lunchtime rush was over. Suzo was sitting at the restaurant's far edge, a baseball cap pulled down over her face. She was hiding her face with the cap and carefully watching a couple sitting nearby. A cheerful employee put down two giant silver plates, or trays, more accurately, in front of them. Suzo could see the other customers looking at them and whispering. The couple really stood out, after all. The man was a giant who looked like he ate major curry all the time, but the woman was slim, pretty, and looked very kind. The combination of huge man and slim woman was as unbalanced as the combination of pretty girl and major curry. The major curry was big, it was huge, Suzo knew from experience. The massive silver trays were loaded with rice and curry and topped with two fried cutlets, fried shrimp, sausage, a boiled egg, and a mountain of cabbage. That's a lot of food. There was 2 or 3 times as much curry as you'd find in a normal dish, and the toppings were just as big. Even a growing young boy would find it hard to eat them all. Suzo was irritated. The Beauty and the Beast couple that Suzo was watching, of course, was Rintarou and Yuki. In the morning, they'd gone to see a movie in Yurakucho, then they'd come to Akihabara and gone straight to Go-Go Curry. Suzo had followed them the whole time. That's why she couldn't believe Itaru's choice of date spots. He is very hungry. She clutched her spoon tight and gritted her teeth. Suzo knew next to nothing about Japanese youth culture in 2011, and even she knew it was a bad idea. Who knew what was going through Yuki's mind, or so Suzo had thought. But... oh, she looks so pretty. Oh. Surprisingly, Yuki was ignoring the people around her and innocently enjoying the huge curry. Now that is wife material if I've ever seen it. Suzu had evidently worried over nothing, but still she realized that Rintarou was acting strangely. Ever since he'd come out of the movie theater, he was walking and talking strangely. Instead of his usual hunched posture, he was forcing himself to stand up straight. His every movement seemed oddly forced, as if he were a broken robot. And he downed glass after glass of water. Rintarou poured water into Yuki's cup. Suzuha had a bad feeling, and she was right. Rintarou was moving so awkwardly that he almost spilled water on her hands. Oh. Oh, Yuki quickly laid down the table with her handkerchief and grabbed her fork and spoon. There were stars in her eyes. Yuki seemed to be really enjoying her meal, but Rintarou was very formal and quiet. He was taking little nibbles out of a piece of fried cutlet like a squirrel eating a nut. The whole time, they weren't saying a word. This is so cute! She decided to send him a message on Ryan telling him to get his act together, and she'd just taken out her phone when... A huge plate was laid on the table in front of her. The other customers started murmuring again. Come to think of it, when she'd followed them into the store, she'd ordered her usual major curry with extra roast, then forgotten about it. Now everybody was going to focus on her. In a small shop like this, it was suicide. Just as she expected, her eyes met Yuki's.
鈴葉さんいたんですか？偶然だね、ゆきさん、兄さん。声かけてくれればよかったのに。いや、気がつかなかったんだよ、全然。
She realized that she should probably leave, but she couldn't go without at least taking a bite of the major curry in front of her. Her experiences in the war had left her completely unable to waste food. She felt Yuki and Rintarou staring at her as she reluctantly picked up her spoon. Yeah, these two are really cute together. I want to see them kiss. Her only choice was to finish her extra large curry as soon as possible. She couldn't let herself be in the way. But instead, Yuki came over and picked up Suzuha's plate. And before Suzuha could respond, Yuki had moved her plate over to their table. She had no choice but to follow, but before she sat down, she whispered in Yuki's ear. Rintarou didn't react at all, even though she was sure he'd overheard that. Yes. If Yuki says so, then yes. For some reason, Yuki seemed incredibly enthused. Suzuha was overwhelmed by her energy. But even when she turned to Rintarou for help, he just awkwardly sat there, eating his curry like a robot. He awkwardly turned his head to face her. The rest of him stayed completely still. Suzuha glanced back at Yuki. And for the first time, Yuki looked concerned. In the end, Yuki and Suzuha did have their curry eating contest, and surprisingly, both of them completely finished their meals. Suzuha won by a very small margin, but the battle was exciting enough that not only the other customers, but the staff as well, were applauding at the end. But the whole time, Rintarou kept eating by himself. Since this wasn't even a conversation, let alone a date, she sent Rintarou home alone. Part of her wanted to demand that Rintarou explain herself right now, but she decided to talk to Yuki instead. She tried her best to avoid Yuki so far, in order to keep her identity a secret, but it was July now. She would be gone from this era very soon. This might be her last chance to talk to Yuki at all. Yuki sighed a little after Rintarou left. Huh? What had happened inside the theater? Suzuha hadn't followed them inside. She'd spent about 2 hours killing time outside.
あのさ、ゆきさんはなんで兄さんのこと好きになったの？いや、私が言うのもなんだけど、あんまりモテるタイプじゃないじゃん、兄さんって。鈴葉さんはお兄さんのことどう思います？私？好きですか？嫌いですか？好きですよね。見ていればわかります。まあ、
There were parts of him that she didn't like, but of course she loved her dad.
で、私のことは別にどうでもいいじゃないか。それで、ゆきさんは？私はまだ好きかどうかもよくわからないです。そっか。
She will like him. Not only had Rintarou not told Yuki he liked her, but this was still their first date, and they hadn't spoken that much before either. She hadn't even reached the point where she saw him as a member of the opposite sex. For almost a year, Suzuha had stayed with him, and she, Mayuri, and Ferris had done everything they could to get the two of them together, but there hadn't been any real progress. Suzuha felt uneasy when she thought about the future. Maybe her dad wouldn't be her dad anymore. Maybe her mom wouldn't be her mom anymore. Dad and mom wouldn't be together. She imagined that future.
そんなの嫌だ。
She looked straight into Yuki's eyes.
私さ、もうすぐここからいなくなるんだ。ちょっと遠いところに引っ越すんだよね。そうなんですか？多分戻ってこないと思う。心配なんだ。父さん、兄さんのこと。だからさ、ゆきさん、こんなこと私が頼むのもおかしな話なんだけど。
And then she bowed deeply.
橋田至をよろしくお願いします。
There was no answer from Yuki. Suzuha looked up, afraid, and tried to gauge the expression on her face. She looked kind of lonely and kind of sad.
私はどうしたいんでしょうね。
Yuki whispered, and then Suzuha.
ああ、もうどうするんだよ。これじゃ破局の危機だよ。まだ始まってもいないけど。
As soon as she got back to the lab, she yelled at her useless father.
鈴ごめんね。橋だけはもうダメなんだよ。
しょぼくれてるんじゃない。シャレじゃ済まないんだ。とりあえず今日はなんであんな態度を取ったのかしっかり説明して。今朝出かけるときはあんなに楽しそうだったじゃないか。母さんだって映画の途中までは普通だったって言ってたし。一体何があったの？
いや、それがさ、聞いてくれよ。映画の座席って狭いじゃん。だから僕、天音氏の邪魔にならないようにと思ってできるだけ椅子の端っこに寄って座ってたんだよね。そしたら椅子がベキっていって壊れそうになって、
Oh.
で慌てて体を支えようとして肘掛けを掴んだんだけど、
Oh
そ
no.
れが肘掛けじゃなくて天音氏のその手だったんだお。
そんなこと母さん一言も言ってなかったけど。
嘘じゃないよ。あの柔らかい感触は肘掛けのはずがない。女の子の手に決まってる。
そう。
ただ僕、女の子と手をつなぐなんて2次元ならともかく3次元じゃほとんど経験なくて。
それでどうしたの？
天音氏優しいからさ、僕を傷つけないようにと思ったのか、その手を振りほどかないんだお。僕ってこの体型じゃん。手汗とかかきまくりじゃん。ベッタベッタになるわけじゃん。なのに天音氏、何にも言わずそのままで。 なんかそれからすごく意識するようになっちゃって。
ああ、なるほどね。それであんなにポンコツになってたのか。
天音もきっと心の中でキモいうざい話せ変態って思ってたに違いないよ。
母さんはそんな人間じゃないよ。
In fact, from the way she was acting, she probably thought she'd upset him somehow. The problem was what she said.
私はどうしたいんでしょうね。
What did she mean by that?
母さんがわからない。
すずはこうなったら母さんのことは諦めて僕と二人で仲良く生きていこう。
言ってることがめちゃくちゃだよ。そもそも私はどうやって生まれてくればいいんだ。
でも無理だって。
父さんが頑張らないでどうするの？このピンチをチャンスに変えるんだよ。
She grabbed her father by the collar and shook him.
出ないと。
She remembered how sad Yuki had looked when they'd said goodbye.
出ないと取り返しがつかないことになるよ。
ですよね。
Suzo was starting to wonder about leaving, especially now that she had even more to worry about. Maybe I shouldn't have talked to Yuki after all. She realized again how powerless she was being from the future. The Global Brain Science Comprehensive Research Organization Japanese office prep room in Wako City hadn't changed a bit in 6 months. It was still far from being what it needed to be, and still almost completely empty. There were rows and rows of empty desks. The amount of dust on the tables had perhaps increased. After Dr. Leskinen had left, it had probably remained in use.
わざわざ呼びつけてすまないね、リンタロウ。
ああ、いえ。
Dr. Leskinen had told me he wanted to update the Amadeus app to the latest version, so I'd come to his office after class. Maho had connected my phone to her PC to begin the process. He said it would only take 10 minutes, so I was sitting around and waiting.
ところでリンタロウ、以前にも話したと思うが、本気で留学について考えてみないかい？君が問題なければ推薦状も書こうじゃないか。もちろんテストや面接はパスする必要があるけどね。
I frantically straightened my posture.
とてもありがたい話なんですが、今の俺の学力じゃまだ難しいかと。俺、真剣にビクトル・コンドリア大を目指しているんです。だからこそ、絶対に失敗したくなくて、そのためには、せめてあと1年、本気で勉強すべきだって思っていて。
Dr. Leskinen pursed his lips as I tried to stammer out an explanation. But soon,
OK。
he patted me on the shoulder and smiled.
やはり君はとても思慮深い青年だね。
そうですか？そんな風に言われたのは初めてですが。
Saying it was one thing, but maybe I was just a coward. There were times when you needed the courage to move forward without being afraid of failure. Was now one of those times?
では、挑戦は来年かな？
そうですね。
Had I missed my chance? Would Dr. Leskinen wait until next year? I started to get nervous.
根を詰めすぎるのも良くないよ。例えば大学を見学に行くだけでもモチベーションのアップにつながると思う。
見学ですか？
もしタイミングが合えば旅費は出すからぜひ一度一緒に行ってみないかい？
そこまでしてもらえるなんてありがとうございます。
もちろん私は次いつアメリカに帰れるかどうかわからないから時期については明言できないがね。
はい。
I bowed my head in gratitude. Meeting Dr. Leskinen was a real lucky break for me. By chance, my eyes met Maho's. For some reason, her smile was a little sad. She quickly looked away and went back to her work. Maho was staying in a business hotel a few stops down from Wako City. She said she deliberately avoided staying in the same hotel as last time.
少し不便になったけれどね。
というか、少しは片付けたらどうだ？
She hadn't spent that much time in Japan, and it was already messy.
片付ける？私は自分が一番効率的に過ごすことのできる配置をしているだけよ。
Which meant she was refusing the hotel's cleaning service.
そんな風にデリカシーが欠けてるから先輩にはいつまで経っても彼氏ができないんですよ。
I could hear Kurisu from my phone. She was annoyed. After the app updated, I left Amadeus running.
大きなお世話よ。
Yeah, yeah, Kurisu quiet.
普通は恥ずかしくてとてもできません。
Well, cleaning wasn't a specialty of mine either. It wouldn't be right to give her too much of a hard time.
それで、俺に話って。
I'd come to Maho's hotel because she said she wanted to talk to me about something. I wouldn't have minded talking about it in the office, but she insisted on speaking alone in her hotel room. I knew she didn't mean anything by it. After knowing her for half a year, I knew she wasn't the type. Maho looked like she was having trouble finding the words she wanted to say.
あなたにまだ聞けていないから、クリスの事件の真相を。
I quickly shut down the Amadeus app.
それにタイムマシンのことについても聞きたいの。
タイムマシン？
クリスは中鉢論文に関わっている。そう言ったのはあなたよ。ねえ、あの子は本当にタイムマシンを？
あ。
How should I answer that? Last time she'd been trying to decrypt Kurisu's laptop, I was willing to tell her what I'd experienced in order to get her to stop. In the end, I'd lost the chance though, but things were different now. Kurisu's laptop was gone. There was no reason to bring it up anymore. But then Maho said something I didn't expect.
実は私、この半年、本来の研究と並行でタイムマシンの研究をしていたの。
なんだって？
クリスにできたのなら私もって思ってしまって、歪んだ対抗意識ね。意地になっているのかも。でもね、もしタイムマシンを作ることができたらクリスのことを救えるかもって。
やめろ！
This was awful. Why bring it up now? Maho was still haunted by Kurisu's death just as much as I
バカなこ
was.
とは考えるな。
岡部さん、
マキセクリスを救おうなんて考えるんじゃない。そんな可能性はゼロなんだ。神の設営がそれを許さない。
やっぱりあなた、やっぱり何か知っているのね。
Maho got closer
もし
to
かして
me.
実現させたの？クリスはタイムマシンを完成させている。あなたはそれに乗ってすでに人類初のタイムトラベルを行ったんでしょ？そうなんだわ。
根拠があって言っているのか？
I pretended to remain calm. Maho seemed shocked at her own
ごめんな
words.
さい。私、どうかしているわ。こんな妄想を口にするなんて。
ヒアジョーさん。
Maho started to cry. I didn't know what to do when she started crying right in front of me.
どうしたのかしら。私、こんな急に全然泣くつもりなんて。
She used her fingers to wipe away the tears. She seemed pretty unstable. I could sense a lot more fragility than I'd seen before. She looked like she'd been psychologically pushed to the limit. All the things she'd experienced must have taken a toll on her. When we were talking on video chat, I hadn't seen any signs of that at all. Should I tell her? If she was researching a time machine, that was a bad sign. She might start looking into things and open doors that should remain closed. If that was the case, I should tell her what I experienced and then have her give up, just like I did.
わかった。俺が経験したことを話そう。絶対に誰にも 言無用だ。それともう一度これだけは言っておく。マキセ・クリスを救おうとは考えるな。いいな。
She nodded as she wiped away the tears. I told her about the events in the Alpha World line, about the time machine, about Reading Steiner, about the method of sending memories back through time that I called a time leap, about how Kurisu had developed a time leap machine that made this possible, about Suzuha Amane, the time traveler from the year 2036, about the future Suzuha told us about in the Third World War, and about how the race to develop a time machine would set off that war. I told her all these things as matter-of-factly as I could. As for how Kurisu died, I couldn't tell her that. When I told her everything, she fell silent for a bit. Alright, she knows now. She took a deep breath, frowned, and rubbed her.
頭が
I
痛いわ。
read.
全て信じる必要はない。俺の頭がおかしいと思っても構わない。だがもし君がタイムマシンの研究を続けてマキセ・クリスを救おうとするなら、俺はどんな手段を使っても止めるつもりだ。だから変な考えは捨てるんだ。自分を追い詰めるのはよせ。
I was about to say more, but Maho put her hand up to stop me.
もう少し整理させて。あなたの言うリーディングシュタイナーって新型脳炎のことじゃないの？レスキネン教授が話していた症状と同じだわ。
そうだな。そうかもしれない。レスキネン教授には話すべきかどうかまだ迷っているんだ。無用な混乱を招くかもしれないし。君はどう思う？
私に聞かないで。
Maho was still massaging her temples with her fingers.
そうだな。すまない。
あなたはクリスのノート PC を本当に破壊してしまったの？
ああ、壊した。
中身は見た？
ロックの解除方法がわからなかったんだ。見ようがない。
Even Daru said he couldn't do it. There was no way I could do it on my own.
あなたはクリスが書いたタイムマシーンに関するオリジナルの論文を読んだの？
いや、
Maho kept asking me questions. She seemed to be in some kind of strange hurry.
あなたはクリスがどうやってタイムリープマシーンを完成させたか知っているの？
おおよそうな。
再現できる？
どうだろうか。ダルの助けがあれば、あるいは
できるのね。
俺一人じゃ難しい。
私なら。
そんなことは考えるな。
Aw. Maho suddenly grimaced as if she was in pain. I realized how pale she was.
大丈夫か？
Did she really have a headache or something?
少し横になるか？
But she shook her head and kept asking questions.
タイムマシンは今どこにあるの？鈴葉さんが乗ってきたという。それはどこに？どこなの？
I wasn't sure if I should say without Suzuha's permission.
秋葉原だ。
Maho looked so desperate that I found myself answering her question.
ラジカンの屋上に今もある。
そう。
Her shoulders slumped and her head drooped. I was worried that she might ask to see it for herself, but maybe she really was sick.
本当に平気か？
I put my hand on her shoulder and looked at her face.
今日はもう休んだ方が。
There was no warning at all. Maho's tiny body slammed into me. The force was enough to push me back to the wall.
何を？
Before I knew what was happening, her arm was against my throat. She was using the bone in her arm to put pressure on my windpipe. I couldn't breathe or speak. I twisted my body and tried to resist, still clueless as to what was going on. Then she used her other hand to grab my head and slam it back into the wall. Her strength was incredible. I was a lot bigger than she was, but still I couldn't escape her
残念
grasp.
だわ。岡部さん。
Her voice was very dark and very cold, and suddenly she moaned again and her face twisted in pain.
私
she was crying again.
なんで私に話してくれたのよ。あなたは黙っているべきだったのに。
I couldn't escape. I grabbed onto her long hair and tried to pull her away, but she didn't move at all. It was as if she felt no pain. My phone had been vibrating in my pocket for a while now. I desperately grabbed for it. I pressed the button without even looking at the screen. Please answer, Kurisu. I was blacking out. Was I going to die here? Without even knowing why Maho was trying to kill me. But the whole time she was strangling me, Maho looked like she was in so much pain. And wait, was she still crying? Before I could figure out if her tears were real or an act, I passed out. When I woke up, my throat hurt. I tried to cover my mouth with my hands, but something was keeping them from moving. I opened my eyes and saw that I was sitting in some kind of chair with my head facing downwards. I slowly raised my head. My hands were tied to the armrest with zip ties. When I tried to break out, the ties dug into my skin and hurt very badly. I tried looking around. It was a room I'd never seen before. There were machines that looked like they belonged in the operating room of a hospital. But the wall was also lined with monitors, like some kind of guard room or control room. I couldn't see any windows, so I had no idea where I was. My throat hurt when I tried to talk, and then I remembered that Maho had almost killed me. Why had she done that? I felt more confused than angry.
Yeah, Rintarou. Mega Sametakai.
I heard footsteps and saw a wavering shadow beneath the dim fluorescent lights in front of me. I knew that voice. So was it really right for her to tell Maho all of that?
気分はどうかな。喉が渇いたなら水を用意させるよ。
When I looked again, I saw that he wasn't alone. There were several men behind him in black suits. They were looking at me without saying a word. All of them were holding guns. Oh, great. They looked like MIBs and reminded me of the foreigners I almost ran into at the art shop 6 months ago. Or was it the same group? Or that group of people that ambushed them in Steins. There were a lot of things I wanted to ask, but more than anything, I wanted to know why Dr. Leskinen wasn't helping me. Of course, the first thing that came to mind was the obvious answer. It was Dr. Leskinen who had put me here, and Maho had captured me under his orders. But I didn't want to think about that. So all I could ask was a stupid question like that.
私の目に狂いはなかったよ。君はまさに情報の宝庫だ。今や合衆国大統領にも匹敵する価値のある人物と言ってもいい。
He didn't answer me, but he showed me a self-satisfied smile. I could feel alarm bells going off in my head. I was getting more suspicious of Dr. Leskinen.
監禁されてるんですか？
監禁というよりは保護と言った方がいいだろうね。君の価値が明らかになれば狙ってくる連中はたくさん出てくるはずだからね。
レスキネン教授が指示したんですか？
そうだよ。私がこうすべきだと判断した。魔法から君の持つ情報について聞いてね。
ヒアジョウさんはどこです？
ホテルで休んでるんじゃないかな。
ヒアジョウさんは俺から情報を引き出すために近づいてきたんですか？
最初はそうではなかったよ。結果的にはそうなんだけれどね。
あなたも俺に親切にしてくれたのもそういう打算があったからですか？あなたは一体何者なんです？
まあまあ落ち着きなさい。前に教えただろう。 科学者たるもの、常に冷静でなければいけない。興奮していいのは実験が成功した時だけだと。
Instead of feeling calm, Dr. Leskin's attitude was annoying me. I felt betrayed. There was rage, frustration, sorrow, and a lot of other feelings all mixed together as I gritted my teeth. Dr. Leskinen ignored me and gave a brief order in English to the other men. They left the room. Only Dr. Leskinen and I remained.
さて、ウィンターロー。私のもう一つの仕事の話をしよう。
もう一つの仕事。
It was then that I remembered the other world line that I'd been sent to. Shimoyama had told me that an American organization had demanded that I be turned over.
CIA か NSC か
But Dr. Leskinen only chuckled.
一緒にされては心外だな。彼らは無能な公務員の集まりだよ。君はストラテジック・フォーカス社というアメリカの民間情報機関を知っているかな？
ストラテジック・フォーカス社
I'd heard of them before on a conspiracy theory site that the old me used to read all the time. I remembered reading that they'd acquired top secret information on Russian ballistic missiles that even the CIA couldn't get and then sold it. The result was the destruction of the CIA's reputation and at the same time the total reorganization of Russia's military strategy. I'd even heard rumors that during the Gulf and Iraq wars, they'd obtain information about the warring countries faster than anyone and spread it as needed. The world's government supposedly called them the Shadow CIA.
あなたが
Oh.
そのストラト4だって。でも脳科学研究所の主任研究員じゃ。
本業はそっちだよ。もちろんね。ところで私はよくこういう説を唱える連中に出くわすんだ。人間は殺し合いをする猿である。人間の脳だけが大脳神秘質の発達によって狂った信仰や野望を持つようになり、そのせいで戦争が起きる。だが、私はそうした説を聞くたびに思うのさ。そんなバカみたいな考え方は受け入れられない。デタラメだとね。ではなぜ人間同士の不毛な戦争がいつまでも終わらないのか。わかるかな、レンタロウ。それはね、情報のせいなんだよ。人間は誰しもあるコミュニティに属している軍隊だ。個人は自主的に行動しているつもりでいても、実は全ての脳はそのコミュニティに流布されている情報によってつながっている。
That is a pretty easy thing to fight
一つ
over.
の群れとして生きることを余儀なくされているのさ。例を挙げてみよう。そうだな。例えは悪いが、ヨーロッパのある国が行った人類史上最悪の大虐殺は何も中世の魔女狩りの時代に起こった出来事じゃない。20世紀も半ば、すでに原子爆弾すら作られていた、そんな時代の話なんだよ。しかも、その国は当時最先端の文明国家の一つだった。その国の指導者の資質問題は歴史学者に委ねるとして、実際の現場で虐殺に手を染めた人々のことを君は知っているかい？彼らはただの人殺しの猿だったのだろうか？違う。彼らはごくありふれた普通の人たちだった。脳科学的に見ても何一つ異常の見られない普通の脳だったはずだ。ところが、ひとたびそこにとある最悪の情報が伝播すると、途端に彼らの脳は平気で虐殺を行う軍隊と化してしまう。
最悪の情報。
これは我々の使命なのだ。我々は正しいのだ。だから使命に従わない者は悪なのだ。そういう情報さ。
何が言いたいんですか？
人間の脳という脆い軍隊のための情報は、 きちんと制御できるものが管理しなくてはならないということだよ。それがストラテジックフォーカスの最終目的だ。私はそれに共感して脳科学者でありながらエージェントとして協力している。分かってくれたかな？
わかりません。そんなのよくある映画の悪役のへりくつだ。結局あなたは金で情報を売買してるだけじゃないですか。俺が情報の宝庫だって言いましたよね。タイムマシンの情報を一体どの国に売るつもりです？アメリカ、中国、それとも中東やアフリカの紛争地域ですか？
そのすべてだよ。
I was gonna shrug his shoulders and quietly
核
laugh.
兵器と同じさ。抑止力としてあらゆる国に必要だと思っている。
タイムマシン
He's threatening.
兵器なんかとはわけが違う。それが使われたかどうか誰も気づかない。もしかしたら使った本人さえも気づかないうちに世界は改変されてしまうんだ。抑止力になんかならない。どの国も誰がどう世界線をいじったのかすら感知できないまま狂ったように改変を続けるでしょう。永遠に。
その通り、タイムマシンは核兵器以上にデリケートだ。だからこそ、君たちの能力が必要だ。君は確か、Reading Steiner と名付けたそうだね。どうやら新型脳炎とほぼ同じ症例だとか。
That's right. Leskinen was researching a new encephalitis too.
我々は新型脳炎患者が過去改変を感知できるのかもしれないというところまでは突き止めていてね。ずっとその確証を求めていたんだ。世界中の諜報機関も同じ。躍起になって調べている。
I hated myself for not realizing the possibility sooner. I always had the wrong idea. I thought that the reason the new encephalitis patients were being brought together was just to give them meaningless treatment. But I was naive, too naive. Leskinen and Stratfor's goal was to gather people with Reading Steiner and study them.
さっきマホから君の特筆すべき能力のことを詳細に聞かせてもらったよ。本来君からはクリスの失われた成果について聞き出せればそれでいいと思っていたが、新型脳炎の情報まで出てくるとは。君は最高だよ。ここでも我々は世界に対して一歩先んじることができる。というか、君はどうしてもっと早く私にその能力のことを話してくれなかったんだい。そうすれば君の友人勝美の脳もあそこまでいろいろといじくらないで済んだのに。
Hatsumi Nakase. Did he mean Fubuki?
それに君が話してくれていたなら魔法の脳に施術をすることもなかったんだ。
友情さんまで。
Oh, was that why she was acting so weird?
あなたの助手だろ。あなたを尊敬し慕っていたのに、そんな人体実験みたいな真似を。よくも。
今後人類に貢献する情報を手に入れるために必要なことだったんだ。それにそんなに慌てなくても大丈夫。魔法も勝美も将来少し脳機能に障害が残る程度で済むはずだ。
あんた狂ってる。
For the first time, I felt hatred for and fear of the man in front of me. I couldn't believe that this was the same man I'd respected so
Reading
much.
Steiner 保有者の脳を調べればもっといろいろな発見があるだろう。それをタイムマシンとセットで売れば世界の軍事バランスは完全に保たれる。戦争も回避できるんだ。君にもぜひ協力してほしい。
Luskinen's mannerisms hadn't changed a bit, even as he spoke of these horrifying things. He spoke of these insane things in the same manner that Maho once described as like a mischievous child's.
俺のことを騙してたんですね。俺に近づいたのはただ俺がクリスと親しかったからだ。クリスの生前の情報を俺から引き出そうとしていた。
騙していたつもりはないよ。君と最初に会ったのは偶然だ。エムデウスのテストを頼んだのは君がクリスの友人だからというのが大きかったがね。ただ君のことを知るうちに純粋に興味を持ったのは本当だ。今でも思っているよ。私の下で研究員になってくれたら嬉しいとね。だがそれとこれとは別の話なんだ。さっき言っただろう。君は今この時点で合衆国大統領に匹敵するレベルの重要人物だと。私個人の考えよりも我々の仕事を優先せざるを得ないんだ。未来の人類の平和のために。残念だ、リンターロ。そして楽しみでもある。君の持つ情報の全貌を私は早く知りたくてうずうずしているよ。
地獄に落ちろ。
これから君の記憶データを取らせてもらう。君の記憶をアメデウスシステムとして使わせてもらうんだ。面白いアイデアだろ。そうすれば君が不良の事故で死んでも君の記憶は残る。ああ、心配しなくてもいい。元より殺すつもりなどないよ。人間というのはエムデウスよりもセキュリティが甘いんだ。苦痛を味わうとそれから逃れるために簡単に情報を漏らす。秘密保持のセキュリティなどないに等しい。拷問が通用しないエムデウスより生身の君の相手をする方がずっと楽だ。記憶データを取るのはバカップだと思ってくれたまえ。例えば君が拷問に耐えきれず精神崩壊を起こしてしまったとしても近い将来記憶データを君の脳にダウンロードして回復させることもできるからね。君も私の講演に参加していたから知っているだろう。まず記憶データの取得。その後で君自身からいろいろなことを教えてもらう予定だ。忙しくなるぞ。さあ、リラックスして。
This is a big
そうでない
plan
と
to try
デ
and
ー
get
タ
rid
を
of war.
正常に取得できないからね。
レスキにあんたは
そんな顔をしても誰も助けには来ない。ここは我々ストラッフォーが管理する場所だからね。我々以外には誰も知らない。誰もだ。
I was too stunned to think. There was nowhere to run. My knees shook in terror as I imagined what was about to happen to me. Maybe it would have been better to die. And then I felt sick as I remembered that I was fated not to die until 2025. If no amount of torture could kill me, this was literally hell. Her head hurt. Maho knelt down and closed her eyes and bit her lips to shut out the pain. There was an annoying noise in her head that wouldn't go away. It made the headache worse. No matter how much she covered her ears, she couldn't block it out. She wanted to scream from the pain, but she held it in because she thought it would only make her headache worse. She could hear her voice mixed in with the noise. It was Dr. Leskinen's.
いいかい、マホ。君はどんな手段を使ってでもリンタロウ・オカベが抱えている秘密を暴くんだ。でないと彼を殺さなくてはいけなくなる。そんなのは嫌だろ。君もリンタロウのことを随分と気にかけていたじゃないか。散々私やクリスが煽ったからね。君にその気などなくてもついつい意識してしまうものさ。それが人の心理だ。彼を助ける意味でも 彼の持つ情報を引き出してほしい。そうしたら私はリンタロウを我が研究室に無条件で迎え入れてあげてもいい。マホ、彼について知り得たことは全て私に報告しなさい。彼の未来は君の手にかかっていると言ってもいい。
The voice and the noise were extremely unpleasant. She couldn't really understand what the voice was saying. She could hear him speaking, but her brain refused to understand the meaning of the words. But it didn't matter either way. Maho had done something terrible to Okabe Rintarou. She'd sold him out to Dr. Leskinen in Stratfor, and the fact that she knew it just made her guilt worse. She wanted to disappear from the world altogether.
マホさん
Oh, she was on a busy street in a Akihabara in early summer. She was leaning on the side of a building in the shade when she heard someone call her name.
やっぱりマホさんだ。まゆりさん。
It is a big plan. She didn't expect to see Mayuri here, so she didn't know how to respond. She just looked back and stared.
具合悪いんですか？大丈夫よ。オカリンを見ませんでしたか？え。
Maho went completely still. Mayuri's innocent question reminded her of her own stupidity and cowardice.
どうして？
Her voice was shaking.
オカリン、昨日から連絡つかなくて、お家にも帰ってないし、電話も出ないし、メールや LINE にも返事来ないんです。ダル君は心配しすぎだって言うんだけど、なんだか胸騒ぎがするのです。だから今日は学校を早退して、この辺りをずっと探してました。
It was still only July, but it was pretty hot. She'd been wandering around all of Akihabara in this heat. Mayuri Shino was a kind, pure-hearted girl. That was the impression that Maho had. She would never betray someone or get jealous or let someone use her.
知りたい？え？
Mary leaned forward.
マホさん、オカリンのこと何か知ってるんですか？もし知ってるなら教えてください。お願いします。
She bowed deeply.
そうか。
And then she realized, and then she wished she hadn't. Mary was in love with Rintarou Okabe. A dull pain ran down her temples.
君もリンタロウのことを随分と気にかけていたじゃないか。
She could hear the noise in her head. Just tell Mary everything, and then have this innocent girl tell how horrible you are. Maybe you'll feel better then. The idea raced through Maho's mind, even as she knew it was wrong. She tried to hold back her headache as she opened her mouth.
ゆうべ、深夜、岡部さんと一緒だったの。そうなんですか。それでオカリンは今どこに？
Maho ignored her question.
岡部さんは昨日、私にこんな話をしてくれたわ。
No.
彼が経験してきた別の世界において、椎名真由里さん、あなたは何度も死んだんですって。え？
Don't tell her.
何度やっても助けられず、あなたは死に続けた。
You can't tell her this.
その悪夢のようなループから抜け出すために、あなたを救うために。
It was like another person was speaking using Maho's mouth.
岡部さんはクリスのことを犠牲にしたんだって。見殺しにしたんだって、そんな話をしてくれた。タイムマシンを作り、クリスをもう一度救おうとすれば、またあの頃に逆戻りしてしまう。
You're hurting her, but the words didn't stop.
岡 岡部さんはそのことをひどく恐れているあなたを必死で守ろうとしている。ここはあなたを守るために他の多くのものを犠牲にして選択された世界なのよ。あなたは何も知らされていないだろうけど。
嘘、そんな。おかり。
Mary was too shocked to speak. She looked like she was about to cry at any instant. Suddenly, Mary turned around and started to walk away with slumped shoulders. Even from behind her, Maho could tell she was having trouble walking straight. The truth was so cruel that confronting it threatened her very identity. That's how it seemed to Maho. Maho was still in a trance. It felt like there was a fog covering everything she saw. It was all out of focus, like a mirage. If someone told her it was a dream, she would easily believe it. The same was true of her own mind. She knew she should feel worse about what she had just told Mary, but while she realized he'd hurt her, she felt no emotion. That was probably why she was able to say something so awful. And then the phone in her pocket began to vibrate. She looked and saw it was from Amadeus from Kurisu. She felt a small, thin needle prick her paralyzed heart. She couldn't answer it. How could she? She stared at the LCD screen, unable to move her fingers even a centimeter.
出られるわけないじゃない。
She couldn't let Kurisu see her like this, but even so, it felt wrong to just stay here. Maho decided to go after Mary. But by the time she made it to the overpass, Mary was already gone. Since she was right in front of the station, there were many people around, and it would have been impossible to find her.
なぜ私の前に現れたの。私に声なんてかけなければ傷つかずに済んだのに。私はもう以前の私ではなくなってしまったのよ。
She looked down over the station from the overpass and whispered to herself, and then she saw someone in a distinctive outfit approaching her. They were wearing a black motorcycle suit and black full-face helmet despite the heat. She thought it might have been a cosplayer, but instead of trying to take pictures, the people nearby were avoiding them. Given a closer look, the person appeared to be a woman. Even Maho could tell that she had incredible proportions. The woman walked under the overpass and vanished from Maho's view. And then she came up the stairs, and she came right toward Maho. Maho quickly looked away like the other pedestrians and tried to run away. But before she could, the woman in the motorcycle suit ran over and wordlessly grabbed her hand. There was a pain in her cheek. She was caught off guard and staggered to the ground. At first, she didn't know what had happened. She rubbed her aching cheek, and only then did she realize that the woman in the motorcycle suit had slapped her. She could hear a muffled female voice from within the helmet. Her voice was very calm, which only terrified Maho more.
あなた
Because she was wearing a helmet, Maho couldn't read her facial expression. Since the visor was lower, she couldn't even see her eyes. There was no answer to her question. Instead, the woman looked up to the sky as if she'd noticed something. Maho looked up too. For a moment, it seemed as if a black shadow crossed the windows of the building. She could hear a helicopter. It was close. How long had it been there? She hadn't noticed it at all. And then she felt the air around her change. The pedestrians were all looking toward the station in fear and shock. She could hear people saying things like, "What's that? Are you filming a TV show? Some kind of cosplay event?" Something was going on at the station. Maho stood up and looked too.
何あれ
She found herself whispering the same thing as the others. There were 2 trucks painted a deep military green parked outside the station. Men were coming out of them dressed in camo and carrying weapons. At first she thought it might have been the self-defense force, but the men weren't Japanese. It was hard to believe that what she was seeing was taking place in Japan. The men in camo disappeared into the alleyways as everyone watched from a safe distance. They were heading toward the radio building. Maho had heard from Rintarou yesterday that the time machine was there.
まさかストラト4
Or Russia, or perhaps another country's military. Were they here because Maho had told Leskinen what she learned from Rintarou? As soon as the thought crossed her mind, she was hit with another terrible headache. It was all her fault. Everything was her fault. Until a moment ago, everything had seemed so hazy. But now she felt crushed by overwhelming guilt. If Okabe was right, and the Third World War was going to begin here in Akihabara, it would be because she gave the information he shared with her to Stratfor. She suddenly realized that the girl who threatened to kill her had run down the stairs and toward the station. Maho never did figure out who she was, and then her phone started to vibrate again. It was from Kurisu. She wanted to get away from the guilt, and so this time she picked up the phone.
先輩
クリス
大丈夫ですか
何が
一体どうしちゃったんですか
どうもしないわ
だって泣いてるじゃないですか
Only then did she realize that her eyes were overflowing with tears. The fog over her mind was now totally gone, and all that was left was the guilt, the regret, and the headaches.
頭が痛いの
彼の未来は君の手にかかっていると言ってもいい。
She heard the noise again.
岡部をどうしたんです
岡部さんのことなんてどうでもいいでしょ
殺そうとしてたじゃないですか私見たんですよ
私のことは放っておいて
そういうわけにはいきません
放っておいてよあなたには勝てなかった私はどれだけやってもクリスにかなわないねえクリス私はあなたのことを尊敬している私より年下だけど大した科学者だと思うわでも心の底ではこう思ってたのよどうして私の前に現れたのどうしてあと10年先に現れてくれなかったのどうしてあと10年後に現れてくれなかったのあなたがいなければ私はもっと平凡な日々を送っていたはずなのにこんな醜い感情になんか支配されずに済んだのにって私はあなたに常識を破壊されっぱなしなの死んでまであなたの存在が私につきまとうのあなたの死を心から悼みたいのにそれができない越えられない壁としてあなたが立ちはだかり続けていてプライドと意地が邪魔をしてしまうのそんなところにつけ込まれて私は一番信頼していた人にまで裏切られて私を信頼してくれた友達を裏切ってしまったもう私頭がぐちゃぐちゃよだから放っておいてよ
先輩
She was getting far too emotional. Normally she'd never behave like this, but she couldn't stop herself. Oh. Oh, she heard an explosion in the distance. The people around her started to scream, panic, and run. The flames from the explosions were coming from the direction the man in camo had gone. Did they do it? The helicopter sounds were getting louder. Glimpses of their dark, agile bodies had flashed in and out of Maho's vision for a little while now. And then she started to hear loud gunfire. It was more than 1 or 2 people shooting. There was a battle going on between many people, taking place here in front of the Akihabara station. It was like the beginning of a war. If what Rintarou said was true, Suzuo Amane might be near the time machine, and she might be caught up in the battle. She wondered about the woman in the motorcycle suit too. She started to stagger forward. She still didn't know what she was planning, but she needed to take responsibility for what she'd done. Oh, the elevators in the radio building were broken. Maho had no choice but to take the stairs to the roof. But maybe the power had been cut because the lights were off on every floor. She could hear sporadic sounds of gunfire from the floors above. It's starting. Strangely, nobody came running past her to escape. There were several shops in the building, and of course, there should have been customers there. But despite the fact that the elevators weren't working, had they all evacuated earlier, or were they all hiding somewhere and waiting for the terror to end? That was what she thought about as she sweated her way up the stairs. Just before she reached the roof, she saw someone for the first time. She was sitting on the stairs, cradling her knees. For some reason, her voice was muffled, but it did seem to be a woman's voice. Her head seemed big and round in the darkness. It was a moment before she realized that it was a full-face helmet. That was when she realized it was the woman in the motorcycle suit from before. She seemed like a totally different person than the woman she'd met before. All she did was sob and cry for her mother.
何が起きているの？
She shouted louder, and only then did the woman realize she was there. But she didn't even stand up. The time machine was destroyed.
あなたのママって誰のこと？天音鈴葉さん。違うよ。ママって言ったらまゆりママに決まってるじゃん。
Maho's blood ran cold when she heard the name Mary.
まゆりさんがここに。
If that was true, she would have come here after she learned the truth from Maho.
私のせいだ。
Maho put her hands to her head.
私があんなことを言わなければまゆりさんは。
The woman in the motorcycle suit stood up and approached her menacingly.
お前が岡部倫太郎から情報を引き出して、それで事態が一気に動き出しちゃったんだ。ママを返してよ。
The girl grabbed her by the collar and lifted her off the ground. There wasn't anything she could say. When she didn't answer, the woman let go and fell to the ground, crying. Things would be so much easier if she just killed me here. Her mind was in such chaos that she couldn't stop herself from thinking it. She couldn't stay calm at all, and the last thing she clung to was...
クリス先輩。
The AI made from Kurisu Makise's memory data. Maybe she was still thinking about their last discussion because she seemed upset. She wasn't saying anything, so Maho gave up the last of her pride.
クリス、どうしたらいい？いろいろなことが起こりすぎて、私一人じゃもうどうにもできない。自分のしてしまったことなんだから、せめて責任を取りたいの。
And then she realized that she was still being proud and corrected herself.
私は
She asked herself, what do I want to do?
私は岡部さんを助けたい。まゆりさんも助けたい。二人に謝って許してもらいたい。それとクリス、あなたのことも助けたいの。だから力を貸して お願いよ。
先輩が私に助言を求めるなんて。
Kurisu's eyes were wide. That's right. Her pride had kept her from ever asking Kurisu for help before, and it was the same thing with Kurisu too. And knowing Kurisu's personality, if Maho asked for help, she'd use every bit of brain power she had to give it.
ねえ、教えてちょうだい。あなたなら解決策を提示できるでしょう。
That's why they said Kurisu Makise was a genius. She was a woman who made the impossible possible. Maho waited for Kurisu's answer. The last hope, the last thing left in Pandora's box. She waited for Kurisu to give her the answer, but
無理ですよ。
Maho was struck dumb for a moment. Then she realized how selfish she was being and hated herself for it. She'd expected too much of Kurisu and tried to put all the burden on her. And just a few moments ago, she'd been the one who rejected Kurisu.
そうよね。その答えは当然だわ。ごめんね、クリス。私あなたにひどいことを言ったのに、あなたが無条件で協力してくれると勝手に思い込んで。
無条件には協力します。
今なんて。
先輩に頼まれたら断ることなんてできませんよ。岡部や椎名真由里さんのことを助けたいのも同じ気持ちです。
でもじゃあ。
気持ちとしては協力したいんですが、残念ながら私が協力することで先輩が不利な状況に追い込まれます。私はストラト4に常にモニタリングされてるんです。
常に。
ええ、私が誰かとこうして対話をしている間、ストラト4に無条件で情報が送信されてしまう。アマデウスのアプリにはそういう隠し機能があるんです。
Even Maho hadn't known that existed.
だから先輩が岡部を助けに行こうと思ってもレスキネン教授に筒抜けになってしまうんです。
じゃあどうすれば。
でも逆にそれを利用して手を打てます。先輩、私を信頼してくれますか。先輩。
ええ、あなただけが頼りよ。
ありがとうございます。ちなみにこの対話内容もバッチリ盗み聞きされてるはずです。
そんな。じゃあもしあなたが私に協力するのがバレたら。
パターンとしては3つ。サーバーからデータを移動させて隔離状態にされるか、または古いバージョンの記憶データで上書きされてしまうか。最悪の場合には私という存在そのものを消されるかもしれませんね。
そんな。
大丈夫です。あなたは必ず自分で立ち上がれる人だから。
私のことなんかどうでもいいわ。あなたの心配をしているのよ。
私はただのデータですよ。でもありがとうございます。
The Kurisu on the screen bowed and smiled.
私は真帆先輩と一緒に研究できたことを誇りに思います。
何よその根性の別れみたいな言い方。やめなさいよ。
もう会えないかもしれませんから。
私はあなたのことが嫌いよ。そうやっていつだって私を置いて先に行ってしまうのだから。
But that's who Kurisu Makise was. When Maho had asked her for help, both she and Kurisu should have been prepared. That's why.
いつか必ず私はあなたに追いついてやるわ。それどころか追い越してやるから。それまで待ってなさい。
はい。
Kurisu smiled once more and disappeared from the screen. Maho wiped away her tears and plopped the crying girl next to her on the helmet.
いつまで泣いているの。あなたは真由里さんを助けたいんでしょ。だったら私に協力して。まず岡部さんを助けるわ。彼なら今の事態を何とかする方法を提示してくれるはず。
知ってるの。ストラト4のアジトどこにあるのか私は知らない。
私だって知らないわ。
But Maho grabbed the girl by the hand and helped her up, then raced down the stairs.
知らないけどすぐに私の可愛い後輩が調べて教えてくれる。
She told me to believe in her. Kusumaki said wouldn't betray me. Ooh. As soon as she left the radio building, she got a message on her Rhine. The gunfire was continuing. As she hurried away, she looked down at her phone. Ooh. When she read it, she smiled despite everything that was going on.
ありがとうクリス、ありがとう。
She clutched the phone tightly to her chest, but then she quickly changed gears.
ストラト4のアジトがどこか分かったわ。
初めて乗り込んで見覚え先生
Maho shivered at the ice in her words. She felt a bottomless madness coming from the woman in the motorcycle suit. But for now, she had to cooperate with her. There was no way she could get Rintarou back from Maho on her own.
行きましょう。
She needed to take responsibility for the future she'd created, to avoid that cruel future. Maho ran through the streets of Akihabara, where a war was already beginning. Alright, a voice. I could hear a voice.
岡部さん、
Someone was calling my name. I slowly woke up and turned toward the voice.
岡部さん、
Maho was standing in the darkness. She had a smile on her face that was somehow lonely and somehow sad.
ごめんなさい。もうあなたの前には現れないわ。私がそばにいたら、私はまたあなたを裏切ってしまうかもしれないから。ねえ、こんな私の身勝手な頼みを聞いてほしい。どうかシュタインズゲートを目指して。あなたが捕らえられている間に世界はひどいことになってしまった。まゆりさんも鈴葉さんも行方不明なの。私とかがりさんがあなたを助けるためにストラト4のアジトに行ったんだけど、かがりさんはそこで亡くなったわ。
Oh,
何人かを
no.
道連れにしてね。デスキネル教授にだけは逃げられてしまった。アマデウスも消されてしまった。こんなのってないわよね。でも今希望はあなただけなの。お願い、あなた一人に託すなんてひどいと思うけれど、シュタインズゲートに必ずたどり着いて。それじゃあね、岡部さん。さよなら。
Oh. Okay. Oh no, it's so scary now that the war has begun. Bye.